Welcome, everybody, to the Paranormal Crossroads. And we have a special guest today. Go ahead, Jonathan, and introduce our guest today.
Okay, as you can see on your screens, we have Art Hardy with us. Art lives on the Navajo reservation in an area called Greasewood, and he has appeared on two shows of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And one show was a year ago, uh, and that one was called Navajo Nation. The next one was at Rock Art Ranch, and where we went into the canyon there and did some work. So, interestingly enough, those shows both were the highest rated shows for those 2 seasons out of all the other shows that were on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And so, Art, welcome.
Thank you, John. It's good to be here. Thank you, Michelle, for having me.
You're welcome. We're so grateful to have you here today. We're all trying to relax from yesterday's events with what is happening. We have a new president of the United States. It was a
Mhm.
very, very close race, but we now have a new appointed president leading our country. And this is a great topic to start into. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
Well,
Go ahead,
there's
John.
there's a lot of people out there that are disappointed. There's other people that are elated. Um, the emotions are running high on both sides. And what we were talking about a little while ago was that there are people that are genuinely distressed and just beside themselves, and there are other people that are just going crazy and ready to riot because of their candidate winning. And so this goes along, trying to stay in the middle of all this and not be pro one way or the other. Um, what I didn't mention earlier is that Art is a medicine man, and in both of those shows that we had, he actually was able to utilize some of his skills and kind of keep everybody safe. In one of the shows on the Navajo Nation, we had two encounters with shapeshifters or skinwalkers that are from Navajo, and they can be dangerous. They can actually get in a situation where they can take your life. And we were trying to keep the crew as safe as we could under the circumstances. The other one was looking at UAPs and orbs, and Art was actually able to call uh, the orbs in, and they actually told us afterwards that it was the first time they ever saw Dr. Travis Taylor speechless. He just sat there looking at this thing, the video, and he was like, ah, 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 and couldn't really say anything. And um, yeah, the I'm trying to think of the other guy's name that handles all the technical stuff there. Um, the name escapes me right now, but he turned around and made the statement that uh, I got caught red-handed in the act of learning. So those statements, those statements really kind of stood out for me. And one of the things that happened during this time was that in both cases, uh, we exceeded the realms of science by going into a spiritual realm and invoking deities to show themselves or manifest in the second one. In the first one, we had protection prayers done afterwards, which were very important. Otherwise, these things can actually connect with you and hold on and become what we call a hitchhiker.
Yeah, sounds about right, John.
So, yeah, some of our fans they're greeting us, and yeah, there's weird energy today, uh, stirred up for sure. Yeah, there's some definite weird energy out there, and there's going to be some people with actual mental health crisis. And in cases like this, it doesn't take very much to tip you one way or the other. And could you Art explain to us kind of a little bit of the Navajo philosophy on how to keep yourself centered?
Sure. Well, good morning or good afternoon, Michelle and John. Thanks again for having me on the show. Good afternoon to everybody who's watching, streaming in with us. Yeah, I guess really um, what it comes down to is hojonja, and we hear that word a lot. And I think it's become pretty common, even off the reservation, to hear that word now, especially after the last time Trump was in office and he did that ceremony where the Navajo senator, I think it was a senator, had done a prayer and walked around and repeated that word like, hundreds of times while he was doing his prayer. And so I think a lot of people kind of know what that word is now. But to get centered back into life, I mean, we're talking the five different senses that make us human beings. And with that being said, you obviously you have your sight, hearing, your smell, your taste, your touch. And when you're trying to get centered, a lot of times there are beings and entities in the Navajo culture that are trying to disrupt your way of life, your thinking, your harmony, so to speak. One of those deities, in English we refer to him as the evil one, but in Navajo we call it Hochonje, and we also can call it Yei Lejine, is one of his names, but in English terms, it's more or less translates as the devil. And so he has the ability to, uh, you know, change and alter the way you feel, the way you think, in relation to mental health, your physical state, even your thoughts, your thought process, which can lead to devastating effects, such as suicide and depression and other sorts. So this deity is probably the more powerful one in our stories, as to someone that's always trying to corrupt you and steer you down that path that would ultimately lead to your demise. And I
Mhm.
think we go through that on a daily basis. There's definitely temptations out there that can hurt you, that can mess with your harmony. Um, and trying to get back into what we might call happiness or consider happiness, it does take certain ceremonies where we do refer back to this deity, and the ceremony itself, which Huchonja is, that's what it really is about. Um, you've been led astray basically, and you're upset in some way with the world. So Huchonja, or in a shorter version of that, is like Nichon, like you're mad or you're upset. That's where that term comes from. And with that it translates a little different into the spiritual world. You're mad at the ceremony, you're mad at a ceremony, or you're just mad at life, which you could also consider a ceremony in itself. This is where we go back to get rebalanced. And in those ceremonies, they would stand you in such a position, where your hands and your feet would mimic, I guess, or mirror the that deity itself. And so, with that being said, it's supposed to um, line you back up, with all your five senses and put your mind straight, and you should be able to come out of whatever sickness or darkness that you may be in at the time. That's one of the ceremonies that can, and we still use to this day. It's actually probably one of the more popular ceremonies that deals with mental health. A lot of that deals with death as well. A lot of people don't know how to deal with death and are not taught a process. And because they don't have that process down, or so a procedure, so to speak, on how to process death, they end up in a bad state of mind. They, a lot of people might turn to alcohol, drugs, substance, etc. And to get them back into harmony with themselves and realize that life can be okay again. They use that same ceremony for that.
Recently, Art, when you and I spoke, I was going through, a lot of my friends were dying, and I had 4 within 1 week. They had passed on, whether it was through
Right.
sickness and illness, or a sudden death, and it was overwhelming because I felt this negative energy coming from the death, of feeling overwhelmed by what is really going on here. And it's just that there was a time, and then when you talked to me through this, you just said, sit back, relax, and observe, and don't get riled up. And there were other issues coming up against the Native American chief. They wanted, people were bombarding me from an ecclesiastical standpoint about this gentleman, and who is he, what is he doing, and he's you know philosophizing differently from what it is, a church. And so all of that was really, really overwhelming for me that week. We spoke to one another, and now that I've sat back and observed and can take a deep breath, it seems like things have fallen into place. I'm not going through emotions. I am steady. I am seeing the light, through the dark tunnel. And it's really interesting because today, a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed of this election, even on our reservation, that they're
Right.
feeling, well, why didn't so and so win? And it could have been because of this, and that. We start to do that, and then we have to sit back and observe. And Eric Adams, of the mayor of New York, got on national news and said, today we are going to support Mr. Trump. He's our new president of the United States. There will be no rioting. And if you do a silent petition, or, whatever that is, how you feel. And what he was trying to do is just de-escalate the situation from people going out and rioting on
Right.
the streets, because they, of course, wanted the other side. And sometimes you can't get what you want. And so today we are going to go into a new cycle of a president. So people are feeling that overwhelming way, because it's coming at them. The bad news had come, and they don't know how to process it. So similar to when I was talking to you last week, and you just really calmed my spirit. It was like you're talking about, it was the ceremony, and you were the right
Right.
person because of your medicine background. Can you tell us a little bit how you got there and to become a medicine man?
First, you have to be a very wayward person, and the way that it came about with me personally was, I was in the military. I had been going to ceremonies most of my life, with my father, my uncles, etc. And I had gone to the military, and I had never really considered, practicing these Native American arts. I guess that's one way to describe it. I had come back from the military, and I was pretty much an alcoholic at that point. I didn't really have a direction in my life, and the military had put something in my mind which I could not get out of my mind, I guess, and that was one of the things that was hurting me, mentally, physically, even spiritually. And so one day, when I was just probably at my lowest, I went back into a ceremony with my father, and he was conducting this ceremony. And at the time, I didn't really consider myself, going down this path as to where I'm at now today. but I'm ever grateful that I did and I made that choice. And during that ceremony, they put medicine on me, they prayed on me, and I was not expecting that. I was there just to observe. Um, but I had no idea what was going to be coming down the road after that. And so I started going more and more often, and slowly I started to make amends with my mind and some of the actions in the military, etc., that I had seen, I had experienced. And so I guess it really came down to someone just being there to kind of show me a different path. And luckily, that was my father. He's the one that got me started. And so I ended up with a young lady, and we got married. And her father was a medicine man, a very well known medicine man from the area that I come from. And he actually started asking me to help him with his ceremonies. And I guess that's kind of how it all starts. You don't really expect to be in this situation, but just because of the people that I had surrounded myself with, which basically was nothing but medicine men. I had four different people in my life at that point that I blocked everybody else out, and I was just talking to these individuals, and they provided a lot of direction and a lot of light to the way life should be lived and how we should figure out, your own harmony in your own way. Because we're not all built the same, and that's one thing that you realize, through the years as you pray for people, conduct ceremonies for people. Everyone's built different. Everyone has a different trigger. Everyone has a different way of responding to their own life in their own way. And just sitting there listening to these medicine men and how they would speak, and they're part psychiatrists at some point. They're therapists, so to speak. And then when you pray and you use the deities and the spirituality that comes with that, it does get very powerful. And I think people have a tendency to listen to something at their lowest point that is hopeful. And that's what spirituality is all about. It creates a lot of hope. If it generates enough hope, it can change your mind. It can change the way you think, the way you speak, the way you act. And I believe that's probably the beginnings, where I had come from this dark place and transitioned into the light, so to speak. And through all of the philosophies that were being told to me at the time, which I didn't even know they were philosophies and principles, I thought I was just having a conversation with my dad, my uncles, my father-in-law who passed away, and lo and behold, they were really telling me some very, I guess, I would call it secret information, only because it's not shared publicly. And I don't know, I retained it. I was able to retain that information. And as I started to move forward, I had medicine men who were willing to give up more information, and one actually specifically gave me some of the instruments that I use today. And we refer to these instruments, that would be like my crystal, my feathers, my whistles, etc. Things that I use for my ceremonies. He actually just rolled. He took this rug that it was on, and he just rolled it up like this, and he gave it to me, and he says, I don't know why you come to me for prayers and guidance. It's already within you. You have it in you. It's here. It's in the middle of your forehead right here, where I don't think you can't see it, but it's there. And I've heard different stories about that, as far as just being a holy spot on the human body. And it's not only an access to your mind, but it's your, in, I think, is it in Hinduism, they talk about this being your third eye. Well, in,
Hmm.
in the spiritual side of our Native American teachings and understandings, that is also considered another third eye, so to speak. And with that, you're able to help people. You got to be able to look into their soul. You got to be look into their emotional state. You got to look into their physical state. You have to be willing to go down the dark path with them if that's where they're at. And then you got to find a way to bring them back out of it. And all of this is done within, maybe, my prayers usually last between 4 to 6, 7 hours, sometimes depending on how bad, they may be in their life, and what may be affecting them as well. So, and I've had all kinds of different experiences since I've started this journey. Paranormal, yes, definitely paranormal. I had other experiences where people were just down and out, and wanting to take their life, and by the end of the ceremony, they're crying and they're letting out some joyful tears, and they're thankful to be alive still, and that's the power of what we do, and the influence that we have. So in all of that, what I'm trying to say is, the prayer is something that you should respect. Spirituality is something you definitely should respect. Your own energy and who you are as a human being, you should respect yourself in that regard, because you definitely have some kind of impact in the universe. And you're not nothing. I don't. There's that saying where God doesn't create junk, and that's true. We are not to be seen as some type of person, maybe a creature, that is just disregarded or discarded in any way. We all have a purpose in this life, and I believe I found my purpose in this life.
I find it interesting. There are some medicine man. They don't like to be called medicine man anymore, and I don't know if it's just a nomenclature thing, but I've heard they want to be called medicine practitioners. Can you distinguish those two
Sure.
statements?
Right. So, a medicine man or medicine practitioner is just someone who practices the arts, the spiritual arts. And the medicine man, it really has to do with the term man. And I think that's where we're at in 2024, is we have to distinguish our pronouns correctly, and people deserve that respect. There's nothing wrong with it. And I think that at some point, we do have to address some of those closed-minded thoughts. And you look at me, and here I am sitting in a suit, and would you consider me a medicine man? And maybe someone who's viewing right now is like, this guy ain't no medicine man. He's trying to be John Wick. but but you
That's
see,
funny.
I would prefer the term of modern medicine person or something to that effect, only because we've come a long way in the years recently, that we don't need to think of in terms of that. It's what's up here. That's what makes the difference. It's your
Mhm.
knowledge and your spiritual intelligence, if you will. It's what's in here in your heart. And if you can show both of those things simultaneously, you can have a really lasting effect on a person, most likely positive, in my experience anyway.
Yeah, there definitely is a spiritual side
Mhm.
to all of this. And this is what we've been saying on this show all the time. With the paranormal, there is a spiritual mechanism within it. And, in the Rock Art Ranch episode of Beyond Skinwalker, can you made the statement uh, at the end when they were just amazed that they had these orbs show up,
Yeah.
and also determined because they had two UAP DATs. These are instruments mounted on tripods that scan the sky, and they can see everything that moves and focus on it. And when they got hits, they said that the upper DAT that was on top of the cliff was not receiving any of this information, but the one down in the canyon was. And so they determined uh, by process of elimination that everything, all these orbs that were being seen, were actually in the canyon with us, which really freaked everybody out. Not only that, but what you didn't see in the show, and both Art and I can attest to, we were standing there together and something zipped right between us by our heads.
Yeah.
And we just saw it as a flash. It was there and it was gone. And both of us turned to each other, and Art said, "Did you see that?" And I says, "Yeah, I saw something, but it was so fast that it wasn't recorded on the cameras or anything." Remember, our cameras only run 30 frames per second, and for something that fast to go through, probably looked like just a blur. But Art, you made the statement during that time that something to the effect that, well, you asked us to do this, and here you go. I present you with evidence of of
Right.
this stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I guess that sounded a little arrogant when I said that.
it was
um,
timely.
no, well, the thing was, having to prove something to someone who is a non-believer or a skeptic, it's very hard. It's very hard to do that. It's hard to change people's minds about certain things.
Yep.
And I felt like at that moment we had so many skeptics in the room that we didn't. When I finally saw that their facial expressions had changed, their emotional state had changed, they were finally accepting what they were seeing as to be real. That's when I said that, because I was taken back. Thank God, that they were listening, and they actually believed in what was going on, because there was some real power down there. The thing that you didn't see as well, that John didn't mention, was there were rocks being thrown from one side of the cliff to the other side of the cliff, back and forth, while we were doing this. And I went down there and I blew a whistle, a spiritual whistle that I carry. I blew that, and it triggered some stuff down there. And
Mhm.
so, I heard singing coming from further down the canyon. Then we see these rocks flying around, and um, there was orbs coming out of the canyon, the cliff walls, and that's probably what John is talking about. We saw a lot of that going on when I did that prayer. That the cameras didn't capture as many as they had. It still wasn't something that they had on film. So of course they're only allotted 40 minutes or so with the commercials and everything. So there was tons of information there that they could not put on screen, on camera. And I wish that they could have, because it definitely happened, and it was all for real. I had never been there before, so there's no way I knew any of that existed out there. I didn't even know those canyons were ever there. I've been around that area my whole life.
Mhm.
There were also temperature fluctuations
Right.
happening
Right.
in the walls, and some deep into the cracks that received no sunlight. There was energy back there, and then when Art was singing at both locations on the shoot, we saw temperature changes uh,
Right.
right above him, and so there was a reaction, and then um, the singing stopped at one point, and the temperature immediately started going back down. And then
Right.
when the singing started again, the temperature climbed again. So there you have cause and effect,
Mhm.
that something that was repeatable.
Right.
John, John and Art, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but my mom had told me when she was younger, had a paranormal experience. Two orbs showed up. They thought it was uncle coming down the road in his car, and then they split off. I don't know if you ever heard that story, Art. I've said it plenty of times on this show. Uh,
Hmm.
the thing that her grandmother told her, which is my great grandmother, is, "Oh, those are our relatives. Even though your uncle is not there in physical form, but those were our relatives. The medicine man call in our relatives to protect us." Do you agree with that? I mean, is that a teaching amongst our Navajos? Because we come from the same clan, you and I.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're actually my mother by clan, Michelle.
Okay, son.
Yeah, that's
I'll
that's
keep
that,
my
that
eye
that's
on
how
you.
we would. Well, in Navajo, of
Yeah.
course, I would greet you as Shamuk, which means mother.
Hmm.
And from your perspective, you would say shiyaj, which is more of a female term of endearment for their child.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sorry, I totally lost the question. Can you ask your question
Yeah, we were
again?
talking about the orb experience. Are our ancestors coming to us? Because there's an interesting question that was asked, and I'll get that to that once you answer this. Do you agree, both you and John, that our relatives are part of those orbs protecting us through our ancestry?
Right. Uh, well, I can tell you a story to answer your question,
Okay.
and it's a personal story of mine.
Okay.
About 3 years ago, I had a near-death experience where I think I might have passed away for I don't know, a few minutes or something.
Hmm.
But I ended up in the hospital, and during that time, and this is right around when COVID was happening. So this is a very strange story, and I tell it often, but I don't. I just want you guys to know that this is my own experience, and it has nothing to do with anyone else that's out there. So anyway, there I am in the hospital, and I believe that I had passed away, and I went into a different realm. Like the whole area that the hospital that I was in just disappeared. I ended up in this plane, this purplish plane, with
Hmm.
all of these drums around the horizon that were going, all of them nonstop, all the way around the horizon. I could not see anything past this horizon, but I could hear the drums. And I heard a lot of singing going on, a lot of traditional songs and singing going on. And during that time, it felt like I was there for hours, in hours, and I was able to make out different faces and human like forms, I guess, really, during that moment that I was there. And I felt like I was being shown this is the afterlife. And I came back, and when I had come back to this reality, the effects of where I just came from were still lingering in my mind. And this is going to sound crazy, but there was a lot of these little people that were running around my area. So I don't know how to I don't know how to explain that part. And what they were showing me was the construct of the universe as well as life, and our reality and how it's portrayed and how it's put together. Through that, it opened my mind to a whole different type of thought and thinking, to the way reality works, to the universe, to the energy. And you're talking about orbs. Well, I believe that orbs are our relatives in a lot of ways. When we do say in our prayers, we do pray to our ancestors, and we are calling upon them to help us to come and take the illness away, to correct some of the things that may need to be corrected in our life. And so through that, you can say that orbs are a part of some type of human form. To be clear, is like we're made of energy.
Hmm.
And it is told even in the biblical sense that, or in the theology, that you do return back to energy, you turn back to the earth. But if you really break that apart, it comes back to we are energy. And that this is where we get into harmonics, we get into vibrational frequencies, and we can control this body and our mind if we get into that science. And it's been proven. So when you say chanting and you say ceremonies, when you're praying, if you get a group of individuals together, maybe 10 or 15 people, they're all saying and praying the same thing for one person. That's a lot of energy that's being focused on that person, and a molecular structure will rebuild itself, will rejuvenate itself based upon that. So when I pray for people, I'm actually giving up some of my energy, my life energy, for this person to get well. And because of that, I see the effects of that, days after, where I'm just completely drained, and I'm tired, and I
Hmm.
can't seem to focus. My mind gets foggy. But it's something that medicine men understand, and it's what we do. To be ordained to do what I do, and I guess that's the proper term, to be ordained. You got to have medicine put on you. You got to have ceremonies put on you. It's not something I just woke up one day and said, I'm the medicine man now. This is what I'm gonna do, etc.
Right.
It didn't happen that way. It happened gradually over time. And so to become this person that I am today, it's been maybe 10, 15, 20 years in the making, to get to this point in my life. And I feel comfortable, 100% comfortable with who I am and what I do and what I practice these days. It wasn't always the case, though, as I said in the beginning of the show here, as I told my story where I came from, especially with my military experience.
and the philosophies. Hey, audience member had asked, did shapeshifters exist? And I want clarifications to let people know. When the Trail of Tears went to Oklahoma, did they try to protect the people? Can you give some clarifications there? Because from my
I can tell
understanding,
you stories. I mean,
sure.
obviously, I wasn't there. I don't think anyone in this room would have ever been in that time. But the history behind the shapeshifter or slash skinwalker, and many of the other names. There's this guy in the army that I used to talk to. He was my roommate, and he says, "Why do you guys call them skinwalkers?" Because all the stories you told me, they're always running. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to call them skin runners? And I thought that was funny. Anyway, small joke. So the thing about that is they would use these shapeshifters, skinwalkers as telecommunication, right? That's what they were there for. They were there to make a short distance run basically as fast as they can, and they use prayers and they use other types of ceremonies to get them to this state. And it wasn't always used for dark purposes. It was actually a way to go from one tribe, one clan to the next clan, and you're able to get information there a lot faster and quicker using this type of spiritual transportation, if you want to call it that. And somewhere through the years, and I believe around the long walk, after the folks had come back from that place, our community, as it would have been, our culture before, prior to that time, Hawaii is what we call it. We had a very loving community, and everyone was well informed of everyone else's thoughts, conditions, experiences, etc. So we had a very close community. After that, we came back with the mentality of, it's all, whatever you can get is whatever you're going to get in this life. And so it turned into greed at some point. We didn't come back with a very good mindset after that. We came back with a survivor instinct, so to speak. And
Mhm.
so the mindset of the community had changed. And you're talking, what, maybe 1,000 people that had come back from this long, long walk. And they had learned how to survive. And I don't even want to tell you exactly what they may have been doing during that time as human beings, just to survive, just to get out of that. So you have that mindset, and then that translates into their children and their children. And so now you have a genocide that's gone two or three, generations, and we call that historical trauma. And through that historical trauma, we're still seeing the effects of that today, where we're not quite as close as we should be, or used to be as a community. Our culture has completely changed and evolved into something completely different. And I would say that the shapeshifter is one of those, is a casualty of that. At one point, he was used for good, and now he's exclusively bad. And so, if that's the case with the way the world has changed, I don't know if there's a way for someone to learn that and change it back to what it was being used for in a good way. There is a guy from my community who passed away who would tell a story that he was learning those dark arts, and he would tell the story openly. And he would say that I learned a lot of that, and I went to Vietnam, and during Vietnam I used that to get in and out of trouble. I came back home safe and sound because I was always able to get out of those situations when I used that dark art. But he used it for good. So after he got out, he never used it again. But that was something that his grandpa or somebody was teaching him how to use. So I guess there's plenty of ways to consider it and to understand it. But I guess what it comes down to is if everyone were to take a good a morality class or an ethics class, and then learn something in that sort, maybe we could change the way that they're seen. And you see that everywhere across in any kind of media where the shapeshifter is considered a werewolf or some type of bad entity, and they're used in horror films, and they're used the terms everywhere. I've seen numerous shows on YouTube who go out and they do these children, kids, or whatever. They go out and they look for these things, and it's not necessarily that they're bad. It's just the stories that came from them after the long walk have been bad. So I believe it's just a mindset that has changed some of that, and the philosophy that comes with it too, and in having to survive in such conditions. And we could look back at World War II, and we could look at the Holocaust, and some of those individuals that survived that and what they had to do to survive just to come home to their families. And if we went over there and asked those same individuals, how has that affected your family and your family lifeline? And generations, 2 generations later, what does that look like? I'm pretty sure you would probably see a similarity of some sort.
Historical trauma, as you reference to it, you know. We talk about everything dark in the paranormal world and forget that there is light in the paranormal, even with paranormal ghosts. I was on Skinwalker Ranch and I was investigating with 11 other people, and we had night goggle vision, and a ghost jumped out of the hillside, and it was happy. It escaped its confines, and we ended up dancing with it, which
Wow.
is kind of the other side of it. And it was really fun. It was fun, and it brought a lot of positive energy. So we forget that other side, and it was really cool to hear about. Sometimes that art can be used in situations. In
Yeah,
this case,
I
to save
have.
that gentleman's life.
I've spoken about being followed by an orb for
Hmm.
30 miles from Indian Wells all the way to the other side of State Route 87 and Route 15. And during that time, I had an orb that followed behind me. It was about the size of a basketball, and it just drifted in the air about 100 yards behind my vehicle, 2 o'clock in the morning, just after we had done a major Bigfoot investigation up in Bloomfield. And during that time, I kept watching it and kept thinking, should I turn around and confront it in my vehicle, or should I just keep going? And I decided to keep going and just watch it. Later on, a very good friend of mine did I don't know what you'd call it, a reading on that incident.
Hmm.
And they told me that that area that I was driving was had a lot of negative energy attached to it, and that orb was following me primarily to protect me. And when they told me that, I was absolutely astounded because just 2 weeks ago, we had an incident where we saw a shapeshifter run across the road in front of our vehicle. And so I'm probably giving the show away here, but I was riding with a podcaster. We went to Chinle, which is a 2 hour drive from where I live in Loop. And on the way up, he kept talking about, oh, skinwalkers this, skinwalker that. And, I'd sure like to see something interesting happen. And he just kept going on and on. And by the time we got to Greasewood, I kind of stopped him and I told him, you need to quit talking about that. I says, because you are going to manifest something, and it's not going to be good. So after that, he stopped talking about it. We didn't hear any peep out of it the rest of the trip. On the way back, we were at that State Route 87 and 15 junction, the road that goes to Winslow and Second Mesa, and we had passed that by a couple of miles. Something ran across the road in front of the vehicle, his truck. And he was astonished. And there was an oncoming vehicle. And that other vehicle um, never hit its brakes. It was a sedan, a gold sedan. So both of these vehicles are going like this. And this thing runs through right in front of both of the vehicles. And he says that it was as tall as the hood of the other vehicle. And he says it was so fast it was almost a blur. But what he did see, I asked him if he saw anything that he could make out. And he says, yeah, the back leg that he saw looked like a kangaroo leg. And he said it had a long tail that branched off into like 3 points. He says, kind of like a devil's pitchfork, is the way he put it. And it really shook him up. Later on, we went back and we measured the road width, and we did some calculations on how fast that thing ran across the road. And we used the lowest number that we could get, um, which was that it made it across that road in less than a second. And after that, we determined that that thing was probably going about 87 miles an hour when it crossed the road in front of us, um, which would represent the very first time anything like that has actually been mathematically calculated. Um, so that was one incident along that highway. Another incident occurred when there was a rollover near Indian Wells. And the EMTs that responded, one of them asked the lady that was driving the vehicle, what made you drive off the road? Because she cranked the wheel and the vehicle went off the road, rolled into a ditch. And she said that as she was driving down that road, there was a white figure standing in the road, painted white all the way through, and its hair was white. And she said it was crouched down and it had a bow, a little bow, they said, and it was aiming right at her vehicle.
Hmm.
And so she swerved and crashed. And the police department has had numerous cases of shapeshifters along that road. Um, Later on, after we got back, I smudged everybody and gave them some. We burned not only the cedar, but we put some lightning struck tree medicine on it and burned it too, and smoked everybody front and back, and explained to them how the intent was the most important thing. Um, so when this person had told me that this orb was there to protect me, it all made sense
Mm-hmm.
that this thing was there because this road was a pretty dangerous section of road. Later on, a family member contacted one of their friends, and that friend says, "Oh yeah," they says, "there's a kangaroo-looking shapeshifter that appears on that road, and everybody in the community knows about it." So somewhere along the line, they got a hold of a animal skin belonging to a kangaroo and utilized that. So talk about otherworldly, even for this area. The other interesting thing about that is that the fastest land animal on the reservation is a pronghorn antelope, which can reach speeds of about 50 miles an hour. The fastest animal in the world is a cheetah. It can reach speeds of 60 to 70 miles an hour. And we clocked this thing doing 87, which lends itself to this idea that these things can keep up with vehicles. So, you know,
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting thing, and I've been smoking myself pretty regularly since then.
Yeah.
And
I've seen quite a few, you know, all different kinds, shapes, sizes, orbs, non-orbs. Just
Hmm.
there's so many different types. There's just not one kind that exists. It's I don't know. Maybe it's something they come up with on their own, kind of like their own costume, so to speak, or their own way of doing things. But I've seen so many different ones, and it's just amazing that you would hear other stories like yours, John, and it's just something completely different again. Like with the guy with the little bow and arrow versus some of the more traditional stories that you would hear of just wearing a skin and walking around, etc. But one thing that seems to be very I guess the smell, that's one of the things that connects all of these stories is the way they smell. And even when they don't have a body, they still tend to give off an odor. So I don't know if they're they could be hypnotizing people, who knows, to where they'd be standing right in front of you. And case in point, I think last summer I was doing a prayer for a guy out in Greasewood, and a skinwalker came running up to us and stood right next to him, and he could not see it. He couldn't see it standing right in front of him. And I told him not to move, just stand still. I'm doing my thing here. And so I'm praying, and I just told him don't react to it. And he goes, react to what? There's nothing here. What are you talking about? And I'm like, you can't see that in front of you? This tall figure standing right in front of you that smells awful. He says, I don't see nothing. I can't hear nothing. I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. And so I guess that really is what can happen to a person who has maybe a not so much of a good lifestyle, and they're very they can be influenced basically. And if they can be influenced negatively, right, then they're not going to have the ability to fight off whatever hypnosis or whatever they may be doing to these guys. And I just figured it's because I had prayers and medicine on me that I could see that very clearly right in front of us. And that was interesting to me. So it's another element, I guess, to consider in how these things exist.
I've never seen one directly. I've had many experiences where others around me have, but I did have seen the shadows of the skinwalker observing, but just the fear that I felt, just even seeing the shadows of a couple of them while I was on the ranch, a project I was on in the Uinta Basin, and they were almost like cartoon characters, that you see on these films where they kind of have that really rigid
Right.
movement. That's what I saw, but immediately I said, I'm stepping back into inside the house. But I could see from window there that they were still there and they were observing. That was kind of a magical night. And you're right, even paranormal have a sulfur smell that we smelt prior to coming out and presenting itself to us. So I don't think I ever want to imagine of smelling a skinwalker. Although somebody told me while I was on that ranch, I smelled this really rancid dog like smell, and they told me that was Sasquatch.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget that pungent smell. It smelled like urine with a wet dog smell. Would that be considered maybe a skinwalker smell too? I'm just asking a
R-
question.
Yeah. I mean, they do sound, they smell more like something that has died.
yeah,
If
Yeah,
you've ever come across something on the highway, roadkill, and it just
yeah,
smells, it's typically what they smell like. Typically.
yeah.
I
I
haven't seen one that's comes along that smells like they just took a shower. Definitely not.
Well, there's so much we could talk about on the show with you. All right, we'd love to have you back. And Anything you would like to share, especially today with it being kind of a mental health day after the news of a new elected president. Some people are disappointed, some people don't are confused, they don't know how to move on, but I think also in the paranormal world, as we're talking about these stories, we have had to deal with some mental health issues with being experiencers, having experience with these type of entities, creatures, energies, all of it. We've all had to go through our little mental health and get back on track as well. So we want this to be a safe place for people. And having you on today to talk about this, what are your words of wisdom that you could tell the audience how? Because there was a few people asking, what do you do when these things happen?
Well, we kind of talked about it in the beginning of the show. Um, it goes back to your center point, and where you feel most happiest, and how you would understand the balance within yourself. And I always tell the story of, your five-fingered beings is what we are, what we're considered. But each one of these fingers represents a sense of our five senses. And even the space in between your fingers represents something. And that's something that your body, your state of mind, it's like the Holy Trinity, basically, that the spaces would represent as well. So nothing is unaccounted for within your existence and the universe itself. And it goes back to what I said, that you are worth something, you are someone, and you have a destiny, so to speak. And I like to think of the universe as and I kind of explained this to you before, Michelle, last week when we spoke, where the universe is always drawing energy,
Mhm.
and constantly, in order for the universe to grow, it needs to have energy from other sources. And I believe that's who we are and what we're meant to be, is part of that expanding unit. And we get recirculated at some point, and this is where reincarnation comes out. And I think that in retrospect, you have to consider anything traditional, culture wise, as a part of a holistic type of thinking, a thought, a mind. And you definitely want to stay on point with your own kind of happiness, whatever that may be. And I hope that most people out there can understand what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to be cryptic, but it's just it within what 2 or 3 minutes to explain this. It's going to take some time to explain it. But I want everyone to know out there that it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And if you have some type of spirituality in the way that you live your life, whether you believe in God, some theology of some sort, or culture from a Native American background, I mean, you're fine. The idea is that you are God, you're God, and so to speak. Whatever comes out of this is a holy place. Your words go right back into your own ears, and your brain understands that. And so you have the power to manifest goodness, just as easily as darkness within yourself. So there's been things out there that talk about your energy, and how if you talk to yourself in a good way every day, your molecular structure will respond to that in a good, positive way. And if you talk to yourself in a bad way, obviously you're going to feel, the effects of that in a negative way. So I think that if you are feeling that way today, down, you need to be talking to yourself and saying something good to yourself, is what I'm trying to say. That at the tip of your tongue here is where God can reside, or does reside in our culture. And the power of the tongue, it can change. It can change a lot of things. It can change your life, for good or bad, whatever your desire is. And this is one of the teachings that we have, a discipline and a principle that goes along with it, that we talk about. Be careful what you say, and I know it's probably out there in other communities, and but in the Navajo culture, there's some strictness to that, especially with the way you pray. And we're not supposed to be making fun of our traditional language as well, Navajo language, because that has a very negative effect on us. There were 12 different types of slogans that were given to us from the holy ones that we're supposed to keep and respect and utilize. Is our talking God. He's one of the gods as well that has that ability to take or the ability to heal, and we use that through this breath here, like the God of breath. And some people consider that as Jesus Christ in certain theologies, right? So we have that ability to heal ourselves, and there's a lot of ways you can think about this, and I want to try to keep it short so everyone can stay on point.
Well, thank you, Art. We're at the top of the hour. I'd like to excuse everybody that usually comes on the show. Laura Massey with Two Feathers. She's probably exhausted from the election show that they did last night. Andrew, same thing. They were up watching the results and had a little show around watching and observing what's going to happen for the newly elected president. As well as Dale. They're living in the UK at this point, and there are UK partners. And we wish them well rest. And Art, it's been wonderful having you on. We'd love to have you back on another show. There's so much to talk about when it comes to your skill set and what you've done. And I wish we could go back and tell more of your story. And Jonathan, thank you for being on today. It's been fun and always informative. You're always full of historical data and research of things you've done. And we just look forward to having our audience here today and all the wonderful questions they ask. We try to answer a lot of them, but we can't get to all of them. But we appreciate you asking, and maybe behind the scenes we can answer those. Art, is there any way that people can get some work done with you, or is it strictly a calling position with the tribe?
No, I'm actually in Albuquerque, New Mexico right now. And I
Okay.
did a prayer. I did a prayer here last week in Albuquerque. So I do travel to help whoever needs help.
Okay. Is
Don't
there a
have a
way they
problem
can
with
get a
that.
hold? Is there a way they
Um,
can get a hold
I'd
of you?
probably I'd give out my email address. I think my
Okay.
email address is fine.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to be giving out my cell phone just yet.
You got to establish it with the client or with your person.
Right, right.
Yeah. Jonathan, any last words?
Just thank you everybody for tuning in, and we're nothing without you guys. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a great show, and you guys have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.